In this video, we have Patrick Gallagher from GridPane. Patrick, thank you for taking the time to do this. We're just going to dive right into it. What specific problems is GridPane solving?
So first of all, thanks for having me. Appreciate you taking the time. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Patrick Gallagher. I'm the co-founder and CEO of GridPane. We help serious WordPress professionals smash their hosting problems. Before I started GridPane, I ran my own, what I would call marketing and technology agency for almost 13 years. The primary function of what it is that we did is we had roughly 24 white glove, high touch engagements with clients every year, generally 6 to 12 month long engagements where we were basically kind of their marketing and technology department in a box. And so we built a lot of WordPress websites. We did email marketing, PPC, copywriting, you name it. And so in that dozen plus years, I certainly used every shitty host on the face of the planet, but I also used some really good ones. And it was actually the second time that I canceled an account at WP Engine that I decided, like, to hell with it. I need to actually solve these problems, the problems that I observed in the ecosystem. I needed to solve them for myself and for my clients. And so I set out to build a tool that would effectively facilitate a lot of the things that I wanted to be able to do from a hosting perspective that I just couldn't get anywhere else. I literally had one of those Ben Franklin pros and cons lists of all of the solutions that existed out there, from the control panels of the world, the cPanels, the run clouds of the world, to all of the managed, what I would refer to as traditionally managed WordPress solutions out there. And none of them actually checked all of the boxes that I needed. And so I started building GridPane for my own agency, so that literally I could tell people on my team, hey, we got a new client in London. I need you to spin up a server in London and stand their site up over there. I wanted all of the things that you get from a traditional managed WordPress environment: staging, backups, updates, performance, security, kind of these foundational pillars of managed WordPress. But I wanted to be able to control what that was actually running on behind the scenes. When I say I canceled, the second time at WP Engine, I knew that when I was hosting at WP Engine, I was actually hosting at Google Compute Platform behind the scenes, but I couldn't actually access any of that stuff. Like they abstract away your ability to see what's going on. And this is where they hide their margin. And this is where they hide the bodies. This is where they hide their mistakes. And so you can go to a lot of traditional managed providers and you can say, hey, why is this failing? Can I see the logs of what's going on here? And they'll basically tell you no. And they'll say the solution is to just bump up to the next higher plan. That's always the solution, is just go to the next higher plan. And because we let you own the relationship with the actual underlying hardware behind the scenes, we don't have any motivation to tell you you need a bigger server. Like, if we tell you you need a bigger server, it's because you actually need a bigger server. We don't make any money off of it. So we have this idea of transparency and ownership and autonomy in what it is that we do, so that when people come to us and they say, I have this problem, we can point to exactly what the problem is. We can go, this is where your resources are being exhausted. It's this plugin right here. A lot of people have been so abused by their existing hosts and so misled by their existing hosts that they don't trust us. They don't trust their prior hosts. They don't trust any of the people that they've leapfrogged through to get to us, but we always have the data that we can back up what it is that we're doing. So I started building it for my own agency. And after about 18 months of working on it and investing significant amounts of money in it, my wife said, you do realize you don't really talk about your customers anymore. You just talk about this tool that you're working on. And I'm like, huh. And she's like, maybe you should do something about that. Beginning of 2018, I fired all but 2 of my customers, and we launched GridPane, to the public, and we've been growing it ever since, entirely via word of mouth. We've never done any advertising, and we now have customers in like 130 different countries, all largely off the back of really positive word of mouth, primarily through social media, Facebook groups. We're not hiding behind some crazy monolithic advertising campaign. It's like we're real people trying to solve real problems.
One of those problems that you mentioned previously was the resource limits that you get on a lot of managed cloud hosts. Kingsta has their PHP workers. Kingsta and WP Engine limit monthly visits pretty low. You got low storage, even some PHP memory limits. They build this huge paywall of restrictions that keep on forcing you to jump to the next plan. Let's say someone who jumped up to the next plan and now they're spending maybe $1,000, $1,500 a month at Kingsta or WP Engine. What can they expect at GridPane?
Generally, people moving from a traditional managed provider like a Kingsta or a WP Engine, especially if they're in the, let's call it $1,500 to $2,000 range, they can expect to save easily 50%. They could have one website that they're spending $1,500 or $2,000 on because of PHP worker limits. Like if you have one e-commerce site that gets lots and lots of traffic and you've got to have 16 workers or something like that, yeah, you're paying $1,500. You're paying $2,000 to either of those players, and they literally could sign up for our free plan and stand up $100 server at Vulture, and you're just paying the retail price to Vulture. We're not making a penny, and you could go from paying $2,000 to paying $100. Now, in that situation, you don't have any support because how could we provide support for $0? You would have access to our community and you can go and ask the community to help you with things. But what makes more sense is you're on something like either our Dev Plus plan or our agency plan, and you're paying us, say, $500 a month, $1,500 a month, something like that. And then plus the cost of the infrastructure, again, like you could come from that same world, pay us $500 a month for Developer Plus, pay for that same $100 server, and now you're paying $600 a month instead of $1,500. And you have better support, better resources, better transparency, better sovereignty of your data. Like this is becoming a more and more important topic. People get concerned about being canceled, or what if this organization, their political will changes or their affiliation changes? Do I actually have sovereignty over my data? And the answer is absolutely. We want you to own those relationships directly with whoever you want to do business with. And we make it very, very easy for you to switch those things, to say like, oh, I'm not aligned with what it is that DigitalOcean is doing anymore. Okay, boom, move over here and run on Hetzner, run on Kingsta, run on a Raspberry Pi in your basement. I could theoretically kind of jailbreak my iPhone and I could run GridPane on it. It always kind of depends on what it is that the person wants in terms of the level of support, but certainly at Dev Plus and above, our users enjoy low single-digit minute response times in terms of like, I've got a problem, please help me with it. What do I do? And again, that key difference is that it's like, if we say, hey, you're running out of resources or you need a bigger server, you can know that we're making that recommendation because it's just factually accurate. We want you to get a bigger Raspberry Pi in your basement, and we have no motivation to tell you that other than it is just the truth. That's kind of the biggest thing that people see with us is they know if they're at SiteGround, they know if they're at Cloudways, that they're actually at DigitalOcean behind the scenes. Well, yeah, run it on DigitalOcean inside of GridPane and have really, really, really top-notch world-class support that's able to handle any use case you can throw at it. That's another kind of unique thing that we do, is just even beyond showing you what your resources are going to, it's allowing you to do whatever you want with the environment because you effectively own that hardware. Put whatever you want on it. You need some kind of custom stuff on there? Great, that's fine. Like you want to run something right next to WordPress, like you want a Laravel app or you want to do a headless thing. Great, it's your server. Like you can do whatever you want with it. We have all the imaginable use cases covered for WordPress, but there's all kinds of other things where people might say like, I also want to do Magento on the same server. And it's like, okay, like that's not really supported. And we don't have any team members that are experts at Magento, but if you have to do that, well, it's your server. Do whatever the hell you want.
How do you overcome people who they're just overwhelmed by the flexibility and the amount of options in the control panel?
I talk to people every single week where they'll say some version of, what if I don't know anything about servers? And my answer is always the same. It is, great, just don't touch them. Like you literally don't have to do anything. There are all these knobs, there are all these dials. You do have access to a nuclear reactor. But imagine that you just took over a fully functional, fully automated nuclear reactor. What would you do? You wouldn't touch anything and just let it run. And that's exactly what people do every day inside of GridPane. In my opinion, there's less of a learning curve around like, I actually have to figure these things out. And it's more actually just, you have to just change your mind to realize that it's like, yeah, you can actually do this. You know, like almost all of the fear that people have, like after they get in and they horse around for 15 minutes, and then 15 minutes becomes an hour, and then an hour becomes 2 or 3, then they go, yeah, there's really not that much to this, you know? And we'll do a demo towards the end of this. I'll actually get in and show you what it looks like. And you'll see like, oh my God, there is all great power. And with great power comes great responsibility. Within 15 minutes, you'll have a server stood up and you'll have sites stood up. And then you'll see that it's like all the things that you would want to do, cloning, staging, backups. Once you go through it one time, not only do you not ever have to do it again, because you can literally just clone everything. Like you can build one website the way that you want to build it with all the settings exactly the way that you want to do it. But you can also just go with our defaults, which are good for 98% of WordPress websites. No exaggeration. Literally 98% of the hundreds of thousands of websites that have been built in our world never needed to have a single adjustment, a single dial tweaked. It's only the 1% to 2% of websites where you have really bespoke requirements, you have an enormous amount of traffic, which almost nobody ever is going to see. Those are the only sites in which you actually have to do anything. But those are also the sites where you were probably spending $10,000 a month to run that thing at WP Engine. When you bring it to our world, you can learn to adjust these things, but you can also just pay us to do it. We have plans all the way from totally free, do it yourself, read the manual, you know, like we don't help you at all the way up to, we have other people that are paying us tens of thousands of dollars per month, and they never touch anything. They literally message us on Slack and say, hey, we got a new site. Here it is. Do what you need to do with it. And we stand up all the resources. We manage 100% of everything. But then they still benefit from, if they want to, they can get in and actually see the servers. They can get in and get into the weeds. They can read the logs. But they don't do any of that stuff because they're busy attracting customers that do millions of dollars a month on WooCommerce. And they don't want to think about these things. We literally have something for every budget. There are unlimited options, but you don't have to have, you know, supreme knowledge of the entire universe in order to use our platform. You can literally just get in, make a handful of decisions, basically around who do you want to use to run these things behind the scenes? Where do you want to stand those things up? And that's primarily based on the geography of your visitors. And then how big do you want to go? And that's primarily driven around, well, how many visitors do you get? How much traffic do you have? How much storage do you need? And you use those limited number of data points to stand up your environment. One of the most common questions that we get is like, how big of a server do I need? The short version is it's like, you can basically stand up a $24 server and probably host everything that you would ever want to and never touch the server ever again. You could literally not log into GridPane for years. And we have that happen. We actually have people that are like, hey, something broke. And it's like, yeah, actually you haven't logged in for 18 months and your DNS records are not the same as they were before. And so Let's Encrypt couldn't renew because you screwed something up on DNS, you know? And it's like, oh, and by the way, those notifications have been firing into the dashboard for months and months and months telling you like, hey, this SSL is not going to renew. But if you don't ever log in, kind of hard for us to get the details over to you. So at our higher tier on agency, we have this thing that we created called 360, which is our 24/7 proactive monitoring and remediation. Yeah. And so this is something that sadly it should be table stakes at all managed providers, but it doesn't really exist. Okay. So if you're on Kinsta, for example, they have something where they talk about like sites are proactively checked every 2 minutes. Well, that's an internal process run by open source software that we run the exact same thing. They don't actually use like a third party to monitor that your website is up on the front end and the back end. And so that's what we do with 360. And the reason that we had to do that is we had an agency customer where literally that happened. Their client changed. It was either the root or the www record in their DNS, but they didn't change the other one. And the Let's Encrypt SSL was assigned to both. And so when you go to renew an SSL certificate with Let's Encrypt, they look and they go, well, wait a minute, something changed on the DNS here. I can't renew this. Like, you either need to make it just a www or just a root or both, but you can't have it any which way, you know? And it was like a client of ours that was paying us good money hadn't logged in for more than 30 days. And so they had 30 days of these notifications saying, this is going to fail, this is going to fail, this is going to fail. And then it failed. So what we decided is at a certain tier, just have all the notifications come to us. And then we'll proactively deal with it, because, you know, some people are living that umbrella drink life and it's like, great, but somebody needs to monitor these things. And so I guess that'll be us. So at our higher tiers, like, that's something that we just do because it actually decreases our support burden. You might think that it would actually be more work for us, but it's not. It's better for us to see smoke and go, oh, let's jump on that before it's, you know, the customer comes in and their hair's on fire.
What is actually the difference between managed and self-managed? What do you do and what don't you do?
It depends on what tier you're at. We have options from $0, 100% do it yourself, all the way up to expensive, and it's fully done for you. Yeah, you don't lift a finger. The self-managed moniker has also probably hindered our growth over time, because people think, why the hell would I want to manage this? You are in charge and can, and probably should, if you want to save money, manage these things yourself. But it's also self-managing in the sense that almost every traditional managed host that you go to, the Kinstas, the Flywheels, the WP Engines of the world, they've built all the exact same things, or at least some of the things. Like, I would say that we've built probably 5 to 10 times more functionality than a lot of them, which again sort of contributes to part of the problem of the overwhelm. But behind the scenes, a lot of the things that we're doing, they're doing the exact same things in those traditional environments. Updates happen automatically. Security updates to the servers happen automatically. All kinds of, integrity checks and security scans and all the things that need to happen behind the scenes. All of those things are happening both in a managed world and in our self-managed world. The biggest difference is that we actually allow and encourage you to have control, and with control comes responsibility. A lot of things that you can and should do in our world, like seeing what resources you have available, making decisions about, do you want to allocate more resources based upon, it's going to be Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Do we want to separate this client that's on the East Coast in Chicago from this client that's in the East Coast in New Jersey, for example? All of those things are very easy to do in our world, but you can choose to do them, if you want to. But here's actually kind of the interesting thing about it. So people see that and they go, self-managed, ooh, it sounds like it's going to be a bunch of work. It really is no more work, especially when things go sideways. So if your site breaks at WP Engine, what happens?
Contact support. And
you contact support. So what has pissed me off to no end for years is the idea that it's like, oh, but I'm over here and it's managed, so I don't have to do anything. And it's like, yeah, until it breaks. And then what do you have to do? You have to go tell them that it's broken. So what exactly are they managing? It would be like if I paid someone to manage my desk. Okay, I've got a managed desk. Desk is on fire. And there's a guy sitting next to it with his feet up on the burning desk, and he's on Twitter dicking around. And you go, hey, my desk is on fire. And he goes and he gets a fire extinguisher and he comes and he puts it out. This is literally the case at every managed provider out there. When things go sideways, you have to tell support, hey, my shit fell over. First of all, that you have to do that at all makes zero sense to me, because if they're managing it, then they're managing it. Microsoft doesn't sell Excel as a managed spreadsheet. It's just a spreadsheet. Like, you use it, you put the formulas in it. If you break the formulas, you broke the formulas. Microsoft doesn't go, oh, you broke your formulas, let me fix that for you. So yes, we're self-managed in the extent that you can make all the decisions, and at the lower price tiers, you have to make all the decisions. And so we make it possible for people with zero budget to just literally read the documentation and figure all these things out and learn things that I think are fundamentally very, very powerful in terms of being able to have control and leverage over this aspect of your business. Whereas meanwhile, the traditional managed, I always use air quotes for managed, because they're not managing. What they're managing to do is take large sums of money out of your pocket and put it in their pocket. That's what they're managing to do. By not knowing what's going on, you pay this enormous ignorance tax to say, well, I don't have to think about these things because they're managing it for me. It's like, yeah, what you don't realize is how little resources they're giving you. And you don't realize that it's like their entire intent is to make it so simple and so streamlined and so dumbed down and so constrained that you can't do anything creative or interesting or scale without just paying them gobs and gobs and gobs of money. Again, this ignorance tax is basically like, once your eyes open to what you can actually pay to have a fantastic enterprise capable experience in this world, like literally like just the retail cost of a server. Once you actually see that, you can't unsee it.
What is the retail cost of a $3,000 enterprise plan at one of the big players?
So we have a customer of ours that actually, he was in the review signal benchmark, which we can talk about as a for instance of what it is that we do at GridPane. But guy named Greg Davis, he has a large Udemy course where he has like 70,000 students on Udemy, and he basically teaches them how to use WordPress. Every new cohort that he does every quarter, he gives everybody a sandbox environment inside of a WordPress multi-site. Okay. And so he spins up these WordPress multi-sites, and there's like 3,000 or 4,000 subsites inside this large multi-site. He was paying, I think, right on $3,000 a month to WP Engine, and it was falling over. Like, it couldn't run. Like, he could not pay them enough money to get this thing to run. He now is running that exact same website on GridPane, and I believe he has I won't get the exact spec right, but he has an OVH. OVH is a big infrastructure provider. They're primarily based in Europe, but they've got a couple data centers here in the United States and North America now. But he, I think, is spending something in the neighborhood of like $125 a month to run one server, a bare metal server that handles 4,000 sites, and it's mostly idling. Like, he could probably have 10,000 sites on it and it would handle it just fine. And so that's a for instance. If you're spending lots of money, lots and lots and lots of money at some of these big players, you're probably paying 90 to 95% above the retail price of the actual infrastructure that you get underneath it. Come try GridPane and I'll show you a $20 server doing what a $2,000 server couldn't do at one of these traditional players. Not only can it do it, it'll do it faster. It'll be more performant. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars off of these things, and it's almost exclusively just, you don't know any better, so you don't know what you have. And it works even when people look at like very inexpensive hosting, which I don't want to appeal to. We have no interest in attracting those kinds of customers, because not that I don't want people to have a great price, have a great value. Like, we literally have a free plan. Just use the free plan and knock yourself out. But it's like, when you're paying $10 or $15 or $20 a month to one of these big box hosts, the SiteGrounds of the world, the GoDaddies of the world, the Bluehosts of the world, their entire North Star is no support. They can't provide any support, because if they do, they'll lose money. And that's why generally those people aren't really support people so much as they're like quota carrying salespeople. So when you come in, again, the problem is, oh, it's not working. And they go, oh, just bump up to the next plan. And then magically it fixes itself, because they can't afford to provide any support. But if they don't provide any support and they sell a plan to you for $20, they can make $19.75 in profit, because of how little resources they're giving you behind the scenes, especially when you're talking about these big box providers. You're running on a server that they stood up in Provo 12 years ago. Okay. So the CapEx on that thing, they bought and paid for that server over a decade ago. It paid for itself over a decade ago. And it's all just profit now. It's just how much does it cost to keep the lights on and how little can we pay for bandwidth? And so literally on a $20 account, they can be making 99% profit because the actual amount of infrastructure they give you behind the scenes is so minimal. When you look at the WordPress ecosystem, you look at every company in it, and then you just rank order the most valuable companies in WordPress. They are all of the top whatever are all hosting companies. Full stop. Syed Balki, brilliant operator, brilliant businessman. I think it's disclosed, they're doing something like $100 million in annual recurring revenue. They are a giant, arguably $1 billion company on paper. WP Engine is doing 400 million. And they're an order of magnitude smaller than GoDaddy, who is an order of magnitude smaller than AWS. It's hosting companies all the way down. At the end of the day, buying servers and turning around and selling them to people is an incredibly, incredibly profitable business. And it's like when you look at the value of Amazon, like Amazon itself was never really profitable until they cracked AWS. And now when you look at it, it's like they do trillions of dollars of crap, manufactured in China and sent to your door, but all the profit is actually AWS behind the scenes. Once people see that, they go, well, shit, then how can I install that in my business? Well, the answer is something like GridPane. I don't want people to think of us as an alternative to other managed hosts. You're not walking into Home Depot and looking at different grills to make burgers. What you're looking at with GridPane is here's the franchise so you can launch McDonald's. I don't want to sell you burgers. I don't want to sell you a different grill. I want to sell you the idea that this is quite possibly the easiest recurring revenue driver that you can install in your business.
A lot of people are still using Cloudways. It wasn't that fast. When you scale, it just gets expensive because if you actually look at the DigitalOcean or Vultr website, it's basically 2 times the markup of what the server actually costs. Support at Cloudways was not that great. You can spin up a Vultr high frequency server at GridPane. At what point does switching from Cloudways to GridPane make sense to you?
People would be even more upset now, especially because Cloudways is owned by DigitalOcean. But even before that, they're not paying anything close to retail. That's another thing that people don't really realize is that it's like, even if you could drill down and see exactly what you're getting at Kinsta, and then look at the retail price and go, oh my God, it's 10 times higher. It's like, yeah, but they're getting like a 70% discount off of that. At a point at which you're spending, hundreds of dollars per month on multiple servers on Cloudways, like you can switch to our panel plan, which is $100 a month, and you can attach as many servers as you wanted to that plan. And so now you're paying the retail price of those servers. And so it could literally be, oh, I'm spending $200 a month at Cloudways. You're right on the button of being able to actually switch to us, have all the tooling, actually have access to our team, have us, looking at your, kind of monitoring things, providing support, whatever. And with the retail cost of the servers, you actually start saving money. And certainly the higher that you go, $300, $400, $500. Well, now if you're at $500, the retail cost of those servers behind the scenes is probably $200. So literally signing up for panel and getting the retail servers, now you're saving $200 a month, and you're getting better performance, more transparency, more data sovereignty, all of these things. Like you're winning on all these axes. But certainly if you're spending $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, $10,000 a month, well, now you can switch to GridPane on agency. You've got our top tier support team. You're literally connected to a DevOps engineer immediately in single digit minutes to handle your scaling problems. And you could go from spending $10,000 a month to spending $3,000 a month, fully loaded, and get all of these benefits. You could also be spending $10,000 a month on one website, switch to GridPane on Core, which is totally free, and then just have the physical costs of the hardware. Now, we're not going to support you, and it's not going to be the same experience of being able to get rapid support, but you can also just teach yourself to use these tools. Cloudways has, in my opinion, created a really good beginner, sort of middle of the road offering but they've also laid bare kind of this fallacy of managed WordPress, because again, it's like they basically built a cleaner UI version of what it is that we do at GridPane, and they call it the managed cloud. But it's like, again, just go break your sites. Just inject an infinite for loop in your functions.php file, and then just sit back and wait and see what happens. Nothing happens because no one is managing anything. You've got to reach out to their support and roll the dice and take your chances in that regard. And so we have a lot of people that come to us from them that are paying for like the enhanced $500 a month extra support, that it's like, it's just night and day when they come into our world. Because again, the way that our stuff works, it's like, it's based in data, it's based in ground truth, you know? So when we're showing you problems, it's like we have no incentive whatsoever to deceive. Like, we want you to be able to see what the problems are so that you don't have any more problems, because we don't want you coming to us with problems. We want your shit to work. Their incentive is that you never figure out what the problem is, that you never figure out that the code base is a horribly bloated pig, and that you shouldn't run that plugin, that plugin, that plugin at the same time. They just want you to go up and up and up, you know, up and to the right forever. We would much prefer that we make less money and that you never need support, and that you're really happy, and that you get more work done. And then you just tell people, boy, I'm glad I went to GridPane. That's how we've grown to where we are.
The labels they use on like Cloudflare Enterprise or Object Cache Pro, it's like they almost use these half-baked products that don't include all the features. Like, how can you release Cloudflare Enterprise without APO? Or I don't think their object cache includes relay.
How little people know in this ecosystem is troubling, you know? And so it's like, to your specific point about Cloudflare Enterprise, I would argue that while there is certain benefits to that, and it's certainly included at an amazing price point, I think it's like $5 a month, to turn it on. And it even goes down from there as you add more sites. I would argue that unquestionably, it is better for you to spend $5 and get APO directly from Cloudflare. And I would actually even argue that it's better to spend nothing and get Cloudflare free and actually have any semblance of control over which rules are being applied to your website. I think his name's Troy Glancy. He's active in the Admin Bar Facebook group. He's got a great list of Cloudflare rules that you can apply to the free tier, and you can get very, very similar performance, very, very similar security for nothing. And it's like, and you're absolutely right, like Object Cache Pro, it doesn't have relay. Those things were literally meant to be built together. Like Till Cruz, amazing guy, brilliant, one of the most skilled developers in all of WordPress. I'm very, very lucky to have him on my Rolodex, and we text and send each other inappropriate memes and stuff. But he built Object Cache Pro, and once he got that done, it was like, I have to build Relay now. And he found this amazing C++ programmer to build Relay, and those things literally are peanut butter jelly. Like they have to go together. But it's like the things that people don't realize in this ecosystem, you come to our world and you're going to see some stuff that you just can't unsee, you know? And it's like, you won't be able to go back to like, oh, I'll just cover my eyes and my ears and just la, 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 la.
Can you go over your hardware, your stack, and kind of compare it to some of your competitors?
Every headline is basically, no, we're the world's fastest host. The way that you actually deliver the fastest hosting anywhere in the world is that you have the fastest possible hardware as physically close to the end user as possible. We've never said publicly that we are the world's fastest host, because I think that it's just a bullshit throwaway cliche. But the reality is that I can actually show you how to be the world's fastest host, where you need to be the world's fastest host, by literally just showing you. Let's say you're in Luxembourg and your customers are in Luxembourg, okay? The way that you provide the world's fastest hosting to e-commerce customers in Luxembourg is you work with a data center provider in Luxembourg that has high frequency CPUs, and you put GridPane on it and you serve it in Luxembourg. Okay. Now people will say, well, what about CDNs? Okay, these things matter, obviously. If most of your customers are in Luxembourg, but some of your customers are in Sweden, or some of your customers are in Johannesburg, or some of your customers are in Denver, well, now that's where a CDN comes in. True performance, to me, is all about load testing, which almost nobody does. One of the only people that does any kind of big scale load testing is Kevin Ohashi. He does the review signal benchmark every year. That's the type of testing that you want to do, because one page loading one time on one synthetic benchmark, that's of no interest to me. We very proudly broadcast like our D plus rating at one point, like put it out into the world, like, oh, look at that, because all that mattered to me is a highly dynamic website that has analytics, that has tracking, that has chat widgets, that has all of the things that you need to actually have a functional, high converting, landing page, and the ability to actually get email addresses and people transacting and things like that. So long as all of that happens within a set window of time and it can happen at scale, that's all I care about. And so again, I don't care about if a WooCommerce website has a B- score. What I care about is can they have 300 completed checkouts per minute? Because that's the KPI that matters to the customer. And when you start looking at performance of all of these hosts, and then you say, okay, but show me 300 completed checkouts per second, all of them suddenly get very, very quiet. And they don't even want you to be able to run this testing. They don't want you to be able to run this testing because it'll fail, number one. But number two, it'll also saturate the box. And it'll negatively impact all their other customers too. So it's like they talk about isolated environments and we've got secure containerization and all of these things. At the end of the day, it still is, there's just a bare metal server behind the scenes always. And if you throw thousands of transactions at a server like that, the environment will fail and or the hardware itself will become exhausted. What everybody needs to know about what hosting is you have your hardware, okay, which that hardware is basically behind the scenes, it's AMD and Intel, making the CPUs. There's obviously ARM and, some obscure stuff out there, but pretty much it's AMD and Intel. The faster those CPUs are, the faster your experience is going to be when you're logged in, because when you're logged in, you can't cache that, okay? So for me, the most important thing is I want the fastest CPU cores that I can lay hands on. And then I want that as proximate to where the actual transactions are actually taking place. And then on top of that, then you layer in something like Cloudflare or Fastly or whatever it is. Pick your CDN of your choice. I don't really care. I like Cloudflare because it's free. You can't really beat that price. But at the end of the day, that's what performance is about in my world, because we solve for people who are either hosting hundreds or thousands of sites, or they're hosting sites that get enormous amounts of concurrent dynamic traffic. And when that happens, you have to have bigger and bigger servers that have faster CPUs, and you want to run a very, very, very efficient stack on it. That's part of what GridPane brings to the puzzle, is our tuning and our capability and our team to be able to support you in those things and show you these are the dials to adjust. Yes, you want relay. Yes, you want OCP. These are the things that you do as you're scaling high traffic WordPress. That's kind of a level to which managed providers don't want to do anything bespoke. That's why Kinsta has 16 PHP workers. They go, if it doesn't fit in that cookie cutter, we're not interested, because they don't want to actually have to look at it. They don't want to have to assess the situation. Whereas in our world, it's like, no, let's look at it. Let's figure out exactly what the right thing is. And yes, we'll have more support burden in the beginning, in the onboarding of something. But in the long run, once it's running the way that we want it to run, we don't ever have to look at it for months, for years. And they can grow for months, for years. And we still don't have to worry about it because we've stood something up where we go, okay, last Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you peaked at however many transactions per second. And we've now demonstrated through a load test that we can do 5 times that amount. So long as you're not going to do 500% of what you did last year, this is good. Good luck on Black Friday. We'll talk to you the Tuesday after, and then we can help you scale back down. So there's a lot of nuance that is missed in the performance conversation. And it's one of those things where, again, we sort of handcuff ourselves by by providing all that context, and people go, oh shit, this sounds way too complicated. I don't know how this works. I'll just pay Kinsta $3,000 a month. It's like, no, just come over here. We'll show you how it works. It is well within everybody's ability to grasp these fundamental building blocks. And once they do, again, it's one of those situations where they just can't go back. They'll never go back to a place where it's just like, yeah, I'll just pay extra to not know what the hell is going on. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
You mentioned CPUs. Is that the main difference between your core plans and PeakFreq?
PeakFreq we put out into the world to make it easier for people to understand the transition out of Cloudways. Okay, so we put PeakFreq into the world to basically say, hey, if you are at Cloudways, especially if you're at Cloudways and you previously were on Vulture, but now you've sort of been shoehorned towards DigitalOcean because DigitalOcean bought them, then you can stand up PeakFreq. And the primary difference with PeakFreq is that you can start with us for $20 a month, $30 a month, $50 a month, and we will monitor those servers for you. So you get some of that flavor of the $18,000 a year agency plan, but you can do it at a much lower entry point. And then the prices are actually more competitive than what you see when you go to Cloudways. It's meant to be kind of a one-for-one alternative to Cloudways, where, again, that difference being you get better support, and the support is actually proactively monitoring the servers themselves to see if they're up and running. When they're thinking about, like, how many CPUs do I go with, how much RAM, a quick kind of back of the napkin math way that you can look at, let's say you're coming from Kinsta. And let's say the reason that you're at Kinsta is because you have one WooCommerce website and it needs 6 PHP workers because of the concurrency that you get. So how do you go from 6 PHP workers to GridPane, where we don't limit you on PHP workers at all? Take whatever the CPUs that you're allocated on a given VM, and you can roughly multiply that by between 2 to 4. Okay, so a good rule of thumb is multiplied by 3. So you could have a 2-core, 4 gigabyte of RAM server that would be roughly equivalent to your 6 PHP workers, because you take the 2 cores, multiply by 3. And so you're literally paying $300, $400, $500 to have 6 PHP workers at Kinsta, and now you can pay $20 a month to have a 2-core CPU server. Another super common question that people give us is, well, how many sites can I fit on a box? The quick math there is however much RAM you have on the server, and I recommend never going below 2 gigabytes. So, like, don't build a server smaller than 1 CPU and 2 gigs of RAM. Okay, so call it $10. Okay, pretty much every major provider out there has a $10 or $12 plan. We recommend that you steer towards the high frequency offerings at places like Vulture if they're available. The faster the CPU is, the faster your transactions complete. And you don't need to be transacting as in currency. It could be literally you're making updates on the page. If I'm running a server that's a 3 gigahertz server versus a 2 gigahertz server, well, it's going to be 50% faster. Literally every dynamic interaction is going to be 50% faster, and you will absolutely feel that difference. You go with the fastest CPU that you can get. You go minimum 1 CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, and then the RAM number, you can basically take that 2 gigs of RAM and you can multiply by 10. Okay, so this recommendation is only for basically static kind of brochure mom and pop marketing sites. You've got a restaurant, they've got a dry cleaner, and it's basically just like, here's the address and our hours. Okay, you can basically take the 2 gigs of RAM, you can multiply by 10, and you can put 20 sites on that server. Now, the instant that you're talking about a dynamic website, like a WooCommerce website, BuddyBoss, LearnDash, anything like that, kind of all bets are off. That math changes drastically. Like, it could easily be you can't put one website on that 2 gigabyte server. You know, like you might need a 96 core, $6,000 a month server. Okay, fine. And we stand that stuff up for people all the time. But that's, like, again, that's when you're doing hundreds of transactions per minute. That's when you need these really, really massive servers.
There's no back napkin math for that type of website.
No, there really isn't. I'll give you an example. We took a site that they were spending like $15,000 a month or something like that, and we ultimately got them on a fully managed server that was like all in with our team and everything else. The cost of the infrastructure, it's like $7,000. Okay, so they saved $8,000 a month. Well, part of that cost is basically you have to have access to a team that can fully audit a code base and run a load test of sufficient scale where you can go, yeah, this needs to go, this plugin is trash, this external call is costing us 387 milliseconds every single time. Like there's a lot, like when you're looking at a fully loaded production ready WooCommerce website that does millions of dollars a month, like they're using Metric offsite, they're using Klaviyo, they're using all these different things to send the emails, to send marketing. Like there's a lot more nuance to it. And so part of what you're paying when you just pay $10,000 a month to WP Engine is, again, you just go, I don't have to think about any of these things, whereas in our world, it's like, well, if you work with our team closely, we'll show you exactly what you should be running. If you want us to manage 100% of it, that's totally fine. And we have prices for that. Or if you want to figure it out, if you want to learn how to do load testing, if you want to learn how to do APM, we've documented all these things. If you go and look at Kevin Ohashi's review signal benchmark, in 2020, we competed at the enterprise level, and we literally had GridPane mentioned in the same breath as WordPress VIP, which is arguably the tip of the spear in terms of enterprise WordPress. And so we did that. Honestly, it was like we wanted to prove to ourselves that we could handle, the largest kind of industry standard benchmark. But then since then, we've had multiple customers of ours participate in that exact same benchmark, all the way up to also being mentioned in the same breath as WordPress VIP. And it's like, in a lot of ways, when you go and look at that stuff, and we can probably link it in here somewhere on the page or whatever, it's like you go and look at those things, that's performance, that's load testing. So when people go, oh, well, I can just do that same thing on cPanel, or I can just go over to Cloudways, it's like, no, go and look at how Cloudways fell on their face here, and here, even though they had much bigger team, Cloudflare Enterprise, all these different things. It's like, there's actual technical competency required in order to be able to handle super, super, super high traffic dynamic WordPress. So that's part of what you're paying for in that ignorance tax. Whereas in our world, it's like, you can just pay us and we'll show you, or you can just pay us and you never have to look at it, any of it. It's entirely up to you. Super high traffic WooCommerce, there's a lot of people that think that you can't even run it on WooCommerce. They go, oh, that's too much traffic, it's got to run on Shopify. And it's like, that is patently false. I've yet to see the workload where it could not be made to run on WooCommerce. And actually, I'll take it even a step further and piss off all of the horizontal scaling people. I've yet to see the workload that required more than one large vertically scaled server. So all the people saying like, oh, you have to do Docker and containerization and Kubernetes, and you got to have all these servers and horizontal scale, that's all fiction. That is not actually how WordPress wants to run. WordPress is a disgusting, monolithic, bloated application. It runs best when the database is right on the same server as the web server. These things want to commingle in RAM. Like you do not even want to have one millisecond of latency for it to go through, a fiber optic cable to the server right next to it to do MySQL requests in a different server. We've seen stuff that literally hundreds of completed checkouts per minute. It runs on one server. The instant that someone is telling you that you need to decouple stuff in infinite scale, it's like, that's snake oil. Show me an environment that's running in a horizontally scaled setup right now, and I'll show you an environment that would run better and more cost effectively in one large vertically scaled server. I will throw out one proviso. I have seen one website, literally one website, in which they had to have multiple web servers. And it's like, when you are that fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent, GridPane can also help you with those things. But it is literally like 99.99% of websites will never, ever, ever need anything more than just what you can do on one server.
What would you generally recommend if someone wants the best performance? You
want to find a provider like Reliable Site, like OVH, to some extent, Vultr High Frequency. The reason that we run PeakFreq on Vultr High Frequency is because they have these Intel, doesn't matter, but it's the Intel 2388 processor, which depending upon how it's spec'd, it's idling at something north of 3 gigahertz and it boosts to upwards of 5 gigahertz. Okay. Like you want the fastest idle compute CPU that you can lay your hands on. For right now, that's basically something like at Reliable Site, for example, you can rent servers from them, full bare metal server that's like, I want to say it's about $250 a month. You can get like a Ryzen 7950 3DX or whatever the hell it is. Like you can rent a server from them that would be the server that you would put in your house if you wanted to have a gaming server in your house. Those CPUs are like 4.5 gigahertz is their idle speed, and their boost speed is like 5.8, 5.9 gigahertz. That is literally as fast as you can make WordPress run. And it literally just comes down to, if I have a Ryzen 7950 and it's there's a data center in Lansing that's about 10 miles from here. Yeah. If I stuck that server in that data center, I would now have the world's fastest hosting in Lansing. If I put that exact same server in Detroit, now I have the fastest hosting in Detroit. You can do this almost anywhere you want to, so you can physically go and source super fast gaming servers, but there's also companies like OVH, companies like Reliable Site. Hetzner does this in Europe. They don't do it yet here in the United States, but you can get a Ryzen 7950 from them for like, Hetzner's prices are insane. I don't even know how they are profitable at all, but you can get a Ryzen 7950 from them for like $100. And it's like, that is the fastest CPU that you can lay hands on. I've got a 4.8 gigahertz CPU and you've got a 2 gigahertz CPU at Cloudways. My stuff's getting done almost 3 times faster than you. Every single thing that needs to happen, it's happening that much faster. I used to recommend do this if you have any dynamic website whatsoever. So you have a learning management system, you have a WooCommerce site, you have a BuddyBoss site. Do this because all of the dynamic interactions are going to complete that much faster. Now I think I don't even care about the customer. I care about my customer. So you as agency owner, as developer, as solo, I want you to have a better quality of life, because none of your stuff can be cached. So when you're going in and playing around with Gutenberg and blocks and bricks and BuddyBoss or whatever the hell it is, I want all of those interactions I want them to feel like it's local. And so the way you do that is just the highest CPU idle speed that you can possibly get. And you want it as physically close to you as you can. Go to OVH and look where they have a new Epic 4004 box, or go to Reliable Site. I think they have like Miami, Dallas, New York, LA. They only have 4 or 5 data centers. But then as you branch out, like if you're in Europe, okay, check out Hetzner. And they'll literally say, if, unless they want to obscure the details away, which most traditional hosts don't want you to see any of these things. They won't disclose what the CPU is because they don't want you to know that they're using a CPU that was printed in 2014 and it's like 2 gigahertz or something. They don't want you to see that stuff. That's how you go as far down the rabbit hole as possible. Yeah, is with gaming CPUs that have very, very, very high clock speeds. When people have this argument, of like, we're the fastest, it's like, no, like I will show you faster than that. And then what ends up happening is you get to this point of parity where you and I could stand up competing boxes. And it's like, at a certain point, it's just like massively diminished returns. It's like, you can't get faster than you run the fastest CPU and you run the fastest stack. And it's like, I will put our stack against any hosting stack on the face of the planet. And we have again and again and again. But when you're running less efficient stacks, like Cloudways has Varnish. I do not believe that Varnish belongs in the modern hosting stack. I believe Varnish belongs on Antiques. Okay. I don't know why they're still using Varnish, but they are. And I think it fundamentally just comes down to who wants to reinvent the wheel. Like, they've got a whole bunch of people that know how Varnish works. They've got a whole bunch of people that understand Varnish. So it's like, why would you make a job for yourself if you could just be focusing on capitalizing, on your existing customer base? So that's the answer, is gaming CPUs as fast as you can get. There's a lot of amazing infrastructure out there that if you're running on the DigitalOcean premium AMD stuff, that's pretty fast. But it is not as fast as Vultr High Frequency, and Vultr High Frequency is not as fast as gaming rigs that you can stand up at Reliable Site and OVH. And then once you get to this point, it's like, okay, well, now we need to liquid cool this thing and overclock it. And no data center is going to allow you to do that. Like, the data centers are pretty averse to water. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's like fast enough, But it's like, if you want to get crazy, absolutist, go to the ends of the earth, like, I'll fox with you. Like, we've done it. We've tested everything out there. You look at Kevin Ohashi's benchmarks, and it's like, there's a whole bunch of the usual suspects, and you don't see them there. You don't see Kinsta there. You don't see WP Engine there. Convesio has a whole section on their site about load testing, and it's like they've never participated in one. Well, why not? If horizontal is like everything is cracked up to be, just bring data. Like, we are computer scientists by trade and by training. It's like, just bring the data. If most of what it is that you're doing is my marketing hype, and somebody says bring data, it's like, more marketing hype. Look over here, But that stuff is off-putting to some people. They don't want to hear, wait, it's not the fastest. Like, I thought I checked that box by signing up over there.
I was actually talking with Kevin a while back, and he's working on Orderly Ape. It's basically load tests, what you were describing, hopefully implements into his tests.
I'm glad that he's doing it, and we will probably donate significant resources to that project, because we've had to, as a byproduct of what it is that we do. I mean, it's like, we're onboarding a serious WooCommerce customer now. We start with load testing. Most people don't ever even get to load testing, ever. The number of people who know how to build an actual real load test is exceedingly small. And the tools for the trade are incredibly expensive. Kevin has had to build Orderly Ape because it just becomes so cost prohibitive for him to actually run those tests using K6 Cloud. I think it's like $100,000 for him to run these tests, whereas he can stand the same thing up. It's like he can run the open source software to stand these things up and spend, a fraction of that, literal single digit percentage fractions of that. I just did a workshop on load testing 2-3 weeks ago for our community. And it was really eye-opening for a lot of people, that it was like, wait a minute, this is actually like, wait, all this time I've never done an actual performance test. Like, all these lighthouse scores, it's like, it matters if you want to be able to show a checkbox to a customer, but it doesn't matter at all if that customer actually generates revenue, like through e-commerce transactions, for example. That test is mostly irrelevant. If your audience gains nothing, then to just realize that there's that whole new level of testing out there, that will be beneficial, in my opinion. So this is me logged into my account here at GridPane. Right off the bat, we are confronted with one of the big questions that people often ask us. It's, okay, which one of these should I use? We like Vultr High Frequency. We have a very, very good working relationship with them. And so that's why we recommend them above everything else. They have more data center locations than anybody of these options. They actually have more data center locations, I think, even than AWS and Google, which is really saying something. And particularly, they have data centers in the regions where I believe where I know WordPress to be growing the most, which is developing economies in Latin America and Asia Pacific. Yeah. So it's like, they've got all the usual suspects covered here in the United States, but they also got, Singapore, Johannesburg, things like this. You can pick any provider you want. And I highly recommend that people have accounts at all of these providers, because it doesn't cost you anything. It only costs for the servers that you have deployed. And the benefit of having, multiple infrastructure providers is, if the Dallas data center for Vultr is down for some reason, because some construction project rips up the sidewalk and their Dallas data center falls over, well, there's also a Dallas data center on Linode. You've got more than one option. I very much don't want people to ever be able to come back to me and say, hey, Patrick, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I can't proceed from here. You add in your API key from Vultr. In my case, I can run multiple API keys. So there's a drop down for me. But I'm going to just name this server Tom's new server. So in terms of available regions, they've got them all over the place. Pick the city that is as close as possible to your customer's customer. Or if it doesn't matter, pick the city that is as close as possible to you. Okay. So I think they actually have Denver, maybe. I thought they did. No, they don't have Denver. So for you, it'd probably be Dallas. Now it's time to pick your plan. As I said, we always recommend their high frequency compute instances. We don't recommend anything less than 2 gigabytes of RAM. So we've got this caution, not recommended. We do not recommend using less than 2 gigs of RAM, but you can. If you want to make yourself miserable, you can do that. Actually, I think on our lower end plans, you can't choose this, but I have obviously unlocked, everything's unlocked in my world. But you could say, okay, I'm going to get this one CPU, 2 GB of RAM, because Patrick said that's what I should get. And it's a ultra high frequency. So it's $12. And then you've got more options here, but we've selected the correct defaults for you. Okay. So literally at this point, all we've had to do is basically pick which infrastructure provider we want to go with, named the server, whatever we want to name it. We've picked where it's going to go. We've picked the smallest one that Patrick recommends, and we're just going to leave all other things the same. Okay. And then we just hit create server. And now you get up and you go grab a coffee, and you don't even need to keep this if you don't want to, but it's just giving you the server credentials and the password that it generated for it. And so now what's happening behind the scenes is we're pinging Vultr via their API, and we're provisioning a server. Okay. It depends on how many servers they have in a queue. It depends on a few different things. But let's say it takes 10, 12 minutes. When the server is done, it'll show up in your view here. You can see, obviously, I have hundreds and hundreds of servers that I've orphaned. Some of them I've deleted them elsewhere. But your server will be available in that view again in roughly 10 to 15 minutes. Now, once you have a server built, now you can actually build sites. Okay. So you just click Sites tab. Now we're building sites. So we could say Online Media Masters. So now what you could do is, if you're going to migrate in a site and you know you're migrating in that site, you could just put in the URL. Okay. But let's say we want to do some testing beforehand. So we wouldn't actually just go straight to Online Media Masters. We might go staging.online media masters, or you might own online media masters.dev, and behind the scenes, that's what you use to actually develop on. Okay. And so this is one area in which people get a little bit confused, because they're used to, at WP Engine, for example, when they create a new site, they just get this given to them. They get a randomly generated URL, something dot wpenginesites.net. Okay. In our world, we want you to host the site. We want you to have the SEO benefit. We want you to have the control of it. So what I recommend is you get a site that you own, own the .com. You might get the .io, the .co, the .net, the .dev, whatever it is. And then this would basically be client name or project. Okay. Project dot whatever it's going to be. And then if you have like your Cloudflare API integrated in this, we will automatically push that DNS record, and that site will go live. Okay. Like the DNS record will be live on that site, and you can go and navigate directly to that site. And more importantly, you can share that URL with your customer. And so now the site's actually out there in the world. I myself have been building sites and servers out in the wild for more than 10 years now. When people talk about local development, I just don't get it at all. I never do it. I never do local development. Everything I do is live out in the world, in production. So we put in the URL, okay, and now we need to select our server. And so hypothetically, it would be Tom's new server that we just built, okay? We would select it from the list. And now you have this laundry list of options. You need to know all of these answers, but you only need to know them once, because after you get them done once, every single time it will just be pre-populated. Bundles, okay? Bundles are basically plugins and themes that you want installed by default, okay? PHP version, you need to know. You need to know which PHP version you're going to run. You need to pick, okay? PHP 8.3 is very, very stable now. I haven't seen any sites falling over on it, so I want my default to be PHP 8.3. PHP process management. What do I do? For anything that you don't know the answer to, just leave it. Just don't touch this. This is good for 98% of all websites. You don't need to do anything with this. Server caching, we have lots of documentation on this. We will likely steer you towards doing Redis page and Redis object caching by default. The web application firewall, you don't necessarily need one, but if you want one, turn it on. If you have an SMTP integration with, say, SendGrid, and you want to use that, you turn that on. SSL, do you want to automatically get an SSL? Yes, you probably do, so use that. Do you have a Cloudflare integration? If you do, you're probably going to want to use it. Do you want Cloudflare challenge only, Cloudflare full? You choose these things, or you don't. You literally just leave it as none. Do you want to go through and configure your local backups? Okay, let's do hourly backups. This is something that just toggling that on would cost you an extra $100 for one website at Kinsta to have hourly backups. So let's say we want hourly backups that happen at 3 minutes past the hour, and I want to keep daily backups with no more than 30 days. And when I want to pause the backups when available disk space gets to 10%. Okay. Again, you do this one time and you can apply it every single time from here on out.
You're basically creating a template.
Exactly. And then I'll show you an even easier way to do this. So remote backups, which we also highly recommend, you might want to have those daily, and you'll select, say, Wasabi or Backblaze or AWS S3. I like Wasabi a lot because they allow me to do immutable backups, which means the backups cannot be deleted, which means that you could have a gun to my head and I could not delete or change the backups. Okay, so that's really, really cool. That eliminates an existential threat problem that I believe almost every WordPress user has. If you have good backups and they cannot be deleted, you get to sleep better at night because you cannot be hacked to the point of not being able to recover your backups. So I want to do daily backups to Wasabi. I want to do it at 1:02 a.m. and I want to keep, let's say, daily backups for a week and weekly backups for 180 days. Sure. Okay. Again, once you set these things one time, you do not have to do this anymore. And then you would just hit add site. And if I wanted a staging environment, it'll automatically create the staging environment. If I wanted an automatic updates environment, it will create an automatic updates environment. You can choose to do all of these things every single time, or you can choose to do them one time and never do them ever again. You can just set all of these defaults in your settings and it'll apply every single time. Now, you can actually take this a step further and have what I would refer to as a boilerplate website that you clone. Okay. So you could have your boilerplate photography website that's configured exactly the way that you want. It's the themes, the plugins, the settings, the backup settings, the retention settings, the firewall settings, the caching. You could go way into the weeds and have super, super, super custom stuff. And then you could literally just clone this site. If I want to keep the same URL, which wouldn't really make sense, I could keep the same URL and I've just got to pick a different server. Or I could say new client, .tld, like whatever their site's going to be. And then I just select my server from my available servers list. And then I clone migrate that entire site. So instead of actually spinning up a site, choosing all those settings, installing all your plugins, going in, configuring your plugins, adding in your API keys, connecting it up to New Relic, doing all your SMTP stuff, all these steps, you just go, no, I'm just going to clone my boilerplate photography website. And you could have a boilerplate real estate website. You could have a boilerplate lawyer website. You could have 500 different boilerplate sites. But once you get those settings right on that one site, that one time, you literally just clone the entire thing. And all of those settings, the backup settings, the firewall settings, the caching settings, everything that you've configured that one time, it all just gets cloned. And then the other thing that's really cool about this is you have this option to clone over existing websites. What this allows you to do is effectively have infinite staging. Okay. So you could have site A, which is a staging environment for site B, which is a staging environment for site C. And then site C could be a staging environment back to site A, because you can clone over all of these sites as you're developing things. Now, keep in mind, that's very destructive. If you clone over an existing site, that site's gone. Okay. If you have your backups, those things are still retained. And I believe we actually have options in here to say, when deleting a site, do you want to delete the backups? Do you not want to delete the backups? If you have immutable backups at Wasabi, you can't delete them. Like you have a retention window at Wasabi, so you cannot shoot yourself in the foot. That's kind of infinite staging there. I'll show you one other view that's going to freak most of your users out and make them go, oh my God, this is not a good thing. I do not want to have access to this. So you can go in here to your PHP settings and you can adjust all of your PHP settings. Guess what? 99% of people don't. And you don't ever need to, because the default that we set when we built the site in the first place, all of these defaults here are all very, very good for 90 to 98, 99% of websites. But if for some reason you needed to have more PHP memory, which if we just did this at Kinsta, that would cost you an extra $100 just to have access to the RAM that they already purport to have made available to you, because every container has 8 gigs of RAM, but they're only capping you to 256. If you needed more PHP memory, you can do that. If you have a horribly bloated code base and you need 2 gigs of RAM, if you have it available on the server, you can have it. Okay. But generally speaking, when you're getting in here and doing things like bumping up PHP memory limits, it's probably because there's something wrong with your code base. It's probably not because you need these things. So most of the time, all these settings that you can go way into the weeds on, you really don't have to touch these things. But if you had issues and you had errors and you wanted to turn on your PHP slow log so that you could actually diagnose what's going on with the site, you can do this, but you don't have to. All of these things can be adjusted. You can go way into the weeds on caching. You can go way into the weeds on object caching. You can turn on Redis, Relay, Object Cache Pro. You can get in and futz around with your backups and your local backups, and you can export backups, and you can purge backups, and you can pull restores. You can actually delete an entire server from our platform and then go and restore the remote backups of every single site on that server and be back up in minutes. Like, you can do a lot of really, really destructive, stupid things that you shouldn't do, and you can still recover. I just did something a couple of days ago where I'd actually forgotten about this feature in our platform. I cloned a site from one server from one customer to another server, but the way that I did it, I overwrote the WP config file. And so the WP config credentials were wrong. I had the source WP config right over the destination WP config. And so the username and password creds didn't exist. I messaged the team and I'm like, don't we keep an immutable backup of these things hidden away somewhere? And they're like, yes, we do. So there's all kinds of things that we have hidden even behind all the nuclear reactor dials. We've got a lot of things hiding behind the scenes that get people unlocked all the time. And it makes it really easy for our support to be superheroes, because people go, oh no, I just migrated this site in and I overwrote the WP config, and now I don't know what my username and password is. And it's just like, we just run a command behind the scenes and they're back in business. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those types of commands that are fully documented in our world that let you do all kinds of really cool stuff that is not exposed inside the UI. Because if people knew that they could be as cavalier as they can be, they would be even more cavalier than they already are, which we don't really want to encourage. So again, what I just ran through there, picking the provider, standing up a server, and then standing up a site, that is as complicated as it ever needs to be, is making those decisions one time. Do I want a web application firewall? Probably. Do I want to use caching? Yes. We tell you exactly which kind to use. Do I want an auto SSL? Do I want to use DNS behind the scenes? Yes, yes, yes. Great. Make all those decisions one time and then just clone it again and again and again. Every single site that you add after that, you don't ever have to configure those things. But you can. You can manage these things yourself, or you can let it manage itself for you.
What would you say are your top 5 docs most people go through on your website?
Certainly the caching, and we can link these up again on the page. Like, going through and understanding how caching actually works, I think, is very, very important. I mean, one of the most common problems that people have in WordPress in general is that it is like something, they'll push a change, they'll update something, and then they can't see it. The client can't see it. Okay. And it's like, this is such a pervasive problem that I've thought about building an entire phone service for agency owners, where you get a phone, like you get a Twilio number for your business. And when your customer calls, it automatically checks their caller ID. And then depending upon the caller ID, it clears the cache on their website, because that's always what it is. That's always what it is, like, to the degree that, like, this is my favorite piece of swag that I got at WordCamp US. Kyle made these stickers up in the admin bar. Hey, this isn't working. I pushed this change and it's not working. This sucks. What's going on? Well, there's caching at the server layer. There's caching at the object layer, the page layer. There's caching inside of a lot of builders, like Beaver Builder is one of the most egregious at this. There's a caching layer inside of Beaver Builder. Then there's caching at the CDN, and then there's caching in your browser. If you don't actually understand that all of these things are there, you're going to have a miserable time of updating websites. But once you know that it's like when I'm proactively developing on websites, I either have a whole separate computer sitting next to me, like my last old laptop, or I have a browser that just I'm always running it in incognito mode. I'm never storing anything. There's no cookies ever. So it's like what I'm looking at is what is the actual live production site. Because when I'm logged in and when I'm editing the site, there could be 4 or 5 or 6 layers of caching that I've got to run through, you know? So understanding those things I think is super useful. Any documentation that we have around sizing, I've got 2 gigs of RAM, so multiply by 10, I can put 20 sites on it. Those are things that I think are important for people to understand. Some of the security docs, some of the things that we do around security, I think one of the big things that people freak out about a lot when they're like, well, I can't do self-managed because I don't know anything about servers. Guess how many WordPress websites have been hacked as a byproduct of our stuff being done wrong or people not knowing how to do security? 0. Websites get hacked because the password is password. That's why sites get hacked. Sites get hacked because people's sessions get hijacked. Sites get hacked because they use the same password on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn got hacked 8 years ago. There's an independent security researcher, Vlad, and he's worked really closely with our CTO, and he found some stuff that was like, if you did some kind of esoteric cache poisoning that is beyond most people, then you could theoretically escalate from point A to point B. And it's like when independent security researchers find these things, they're pushed into our platform in like usually single hours. We work very, very closely with independent security researchers. We fund the work of independent security researchers. Like Fortress, if you check out the documentation on Fortress in our world, like that's a plugin that once you turn that on and you have all of our defaults on, it is really, really, really hard to. I'm unaware of any additional steps that you could take to harden an environment once you have stuff like that turned on. It's probably worthwhile for people to look at adding their SSH key and literally logging in to a server and running one command. Okay. People look at this and they go, oh my God, this is horrifying. This is like back to the DOS days. Like, what am I doing logging into a server? It's really not that big of a deal. If nothing else, you can just look at what's on the server. So a good example is like we can point you to where the error logs are. So you can go and look at your error logs and it will tell you exactly which plugin is throwing the error. Like one of the most common errors that exist in WordPress is a plugin is conflicting. And what do? You rename the plugins folder and one by one, you toggle them back on, right? Like this complete pain in the ass process. It's like, no, if you just go look at the error log, it will tell you which plugin is broken. And it's like, you can actually pull that up inside of our UI as well. But I actually think it's easier to just go and look at it in the command line, but that's because I'm a total dweeb. But it's like, those are the kinds of things that it's like, we'll point you to the data. We'll point you to how to go on your server and run one command and look at what is consuming all the resources. You get 20, 30 sites on a box, and the site and you look and the server CPU starts to creep up, and you start getting notifications inside of the dashboard saying, hey, Tom, you're using 80% of your resources. You're using 90% of your resources. You're using 100% of your CPU. Why? What's happening? You know, this is a common question that people have. Well, you can just go and look, and you can actually see like, oh, somebody's hammering that one website. I wonder why. I wonder what's going on. Are they trending on Reddit? Like, you can start to figure out what's actually happening behind the scenes. Whereas, you know, in a traditional managed environment, they're going to go, I don't know, but if you pay us more money, I bet it'll go away.
Do you have a doc that outlines popular command lines?
There's like common first steps. Yeah. New to GridPane, start here. You know, so like there's getting started, and it's like this page, I'll drop it in the chat. And you can see it's like, it literally just walks through step by step by step. Create your first server, create your first website, migrate your first website to GridPane, getting started with DNS, provisioning SSL certificates, using staging sites, and then opening a support ticket if you don't know what you're doing. There's also first questions and answers, which is super, super common. The top 10 most common getting started questions. We've got that, how to choose your provider, how to, the best plugins that we recommend for migrations. People go, oh my God, the WP config file is in the wrong place. No, it's not in the wrong place. We just put it in a more secure place. All of that stuff we will link up, somewhere on the page to make it easy for people. But the getting started, it literally walks people through step by step by step how they can do this stuff. I don't really want people to change their hosting. I want people to change their minds, which I understand is a very tall ask. Instead of just changing your minds, just take a bet on yourself. And what I mean by that is sign up for the free one, get the coupon code that we give you for $100 in free credits from Vulture. I think we get like $20 as a kickback if you actually use that money. Okay. So admittedly, like, we're capitalist swines, just like everybody else, but go and sign up for the free one, get some free credits, and then just literally try it and see how far you get. And if you get stuck in that first 15 or 20 minutes and you're not able to literally proceed beyond those first half dozen steps, reach out to me personally and call me an idiot or ask for help or tell me that you're frustrated and demand your 15 minutes back, and I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Because I bet that if you actually give yourself 15 or 20 minutes to just literally see what you see, I bet you're going to come away with a feeling of, they're really not managing anything. It is all it is managing itself. The most common thing that I get from people is they'll say some version of, this really was not nearly as complex as I thought it was going to be, and like, this is really cool that you can do all of these things. If they have a gripe about us, it's too complicated. I don't know how it works. And it's like, well, you can try it for free. If you want to have a conversation with us about super complex WooCommerce, well, that's a different conversation, and that's a different budget. We're not going to help you diagnose a site when you sign up for free. We're not going to audit a code base for you, but we can handle literally anything you can throw at it. It's just a matter of actually just getting your feet wet and seeing how you like it. And again, if you discover that it's like, yeah, this is great, I get it, I can save a little bit of money, but I'm only hosting a couple of sites at rocket.net, then you're already in the right place. I genuinely believe that. I actually think that Rocket is one of the best traditional managed hosts out there. And I know Ben and a lot of his team, and we're very, very friendly. I would far rather see people at Rocket than at Kinsta or WP Engine or other places where they don't have the same intent, the same heart, the same team. When you go and you look at like the surveys that Kyle does in the admin bar, you'll consistently and repeatedly see people say, outside of payroll, what's the most expensive aspect of their business? And 100 out of 100 agency owners will say hosting. And they need to realize that it's like, no. Hosting is not a cost center. It is a revenue driver. Because once you change your thinking on this, and once you get control of this aspect of your business, you're never going back. You cannot host things more cost effectively, with more control, with more transparency, with more reliability. The transparency creates the reliability because you actually see what's breaking and why. Once you see these things, and once you recognize it, it's like, wait a minute, if all the most profitable and most successful businesses in WordPress are hosting companies, maybe I should become one. And that's literally what we built the thing for. I needed it for my agency, so I built it. And then my wife, thankfully, convinced me that I should change my focus and make it available to everybody. And so cheers to her.
What do you have planned for GridPane in the near future?
One big thing that's definitely coming, and I want so badly to share the screenshots because it looks awesome. As early as next week, we're going to have a totally new, what we refer to as our client portal. And we're going to have a totally new client portal launching that's literally years in the making. And I'm really excited about that because what that does is basically abstracts away everything that I just showed you. And it makes the entire interface much more akin to what you would see at a Kinsta, at a WP Engine. Like, all the dials are removed. Like, literally it exposes only what not just your customers, but even people on your team. Like there's people on your team that if they're a graphic designer, they shouldn't have access to the PHP settings. If you hired a new freelancer that is just doing one aspect of things for you, you want very granular control of what it is that they can and can't do. And that's part of what the client portal does, is it gives incredibly granular controls of exactly what users can do and on what sites and what servers. We have some interesting stuff that we can't really announce the partnerships yet, but we have there's another infrastructure provider that is going to add another 45 different data center locations for us, including in some key areas where we don't have any coverage at all. And again, it's going to give us some more redundancy in some of these places where there already are 2 or 3 other data centers. And we're actually going to be relaunching our PeakFreq offering with some totally new infrastructure that is even faster than what it is. So right now it's already pretty much as fast as you can get, but this is going to be a stepwise, probably 35% improvement in performance while still maintaining similar or better costs than what you can get in a Cloudways world. And then primarily a lot of what we're going to be doing through, the rest of the year and into 2025 is just this deep focus on WooCommerce. We see ourselves as being at the front lines of the battle with Shopify, which is primarily just, again, it's sort of just ignorance. People not knowing that WooCommerce can handle pretty much anything that you can throw at it, assuming that you have the right skill set, the right team. And we're helping lots and lots and lots of people with massive WooCommerce sites have better unit economics, better scalability. And again, we get a lot of people that are coming to us from different worlds where they're spending enormous sums of money on hosting and they don't care about cost savings. They actually want to be able to spend more money. And the reason is because they are currently having to tell their customers to throttle their marketing. Okay. So like you can imagine an e-commerce brand where they have 100,000 people on their list and they want to email the whole 100,000 people and say, go check out the site, but it literally falls over because they're hosted at the wrong place. When they come to us, they can solve a problem that they've not been able to solve from one host to the next, to the next, to the next, which is I'll just stand up the largest servers that you can get, servers that other people don't even connect to. Like if you go on Microsoft Azure, for example, the largest server you can get from them is 96 threads. Yeah. Well, we have boxes that are running in our world that have 512 threads, So if you're working with certain providers, you have this sort of theoretical limit and you just can't handle the stuff. So I think that that's going to be a lot of what our focus is, because we've discovered that with all the dials that almost nobody needs to touch and almost nobody's qualified to touch. It's like those are the dials that you actually need to tweak when you're handling these insane workloads. Yeah. And it's like, so we've just by accident discovered that it was like, actually we built kind of the world's best platform for enterprise WooCommerce. And so we're really going to be leaning into that, so kind of the long story short, we're going to make it easier for people who have almost no capabilities to use our stuff. And we're going to make it easier for people who have the most extreme edge cases to live in our world as well. And just keep refining the tools and hopefully launching cool stuff in the world. So
more tooling.
That's what we see. Yes, more tools.
More tooling.
we are, at the end of the day, we are deeply passionate about being able to know that we have, the best possible solution for the job. And that means getting very, 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 very specific and down into the weeds about what it is that we're building and how it is that we build it. That in a lot of ways has probably stunted our growth, but we're working around that and we're finding ways to make it possible that, in the long run, there will be a direct consumer version of GridPane that will feel sort of like Cloudways, but it'll be even easier. But they'll have that ability to, if they want to level up, they'll be able to. But if they just want to stay at, I run these 3 sites and I never think about these things, they'll have that opportunity.
I think that's all I got, unless you have anything else.
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I would just recommend Check out our Facebook group. It's linked in the footer off of our homepage. There's also this little widget in the bottom right. It's called Video Ask. Certainly, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly on there, if you send an audio or video message, if it's obviously the middle of the night, you're not going to get me. You'll get Steve, or you'll get a different member of the team. But I try to respond to as many of those as possible because I like talking to our customers. We don't have the problems of WP Engine of having 150,000 customers that we've long since forgotten what any of their names were. So yeah, reach out to me on that Video Ask widget, and I will try and follow up with you directly. Test the thing, test yourself. I suspect that most of you will find that it's not nearly as spicy a meatball as you thought it would have been. Look out for us in the Facebook groups and at the big WordCamps. We try to make it to every WordCamp US and every WordCamp Europe if we can. We haven't yet done WordCamp Asia, but I think that we'll try and get one or two of our team members out there next year. We have a couple of other people that are much, much closer, and we'll try and get them out there for WordCamp Asia. But yeah, that's where you can find us.
If you have any questions, definitely join the Facebook group, Self-Managed WordPress, and go through the docs, and hopefully you enjoyed this video.
Cheers, everybody.